Hi, everybody. It's Chad and Nick here.
Woo.
Can everyone see us and hear us okay? Hi, Andrew. Awesome. How about everybody else? Awesome. Thanks,
Sweet.
Omar. Great. Well, welcome to Hands-On with Particles. Hey, Larry, week 2. So thank everyone who joined us last week. And here we are this week, continuing our journey of particles. And Chad, what do we have in store this week?
Oh
I should
man,
know.
so much stuff. I packed like 12 hours of content into the minutes that I have. But yeah, we're gonna be looking at Trapcode form and Mir and Tao and 3D objects and lights and sprites.
Lights and sprites. Wow.
Lights and
Lots of
sprites.
stuff. Lights and sprites. I love it. So if any of you guys are curious, I'm going to copy right now to the thread because we have hands-on exercises as we've promised. So let me just copy that link over so that you guys all have access to the Dropbox. And on all that stuff that we are doing as well, I'm just going to bring us, after I copy this, to the Maxon event page. So let me just drop this in. This is the actual hands-on file particles that you can download. You are looking for the week 2 folder. And hi, Larry, and hi, Drake back. So take a look at that. Now, there were some questions in the thread also about the recording. And just to let you know, the recording every single week, we've decided it's on the Maxon volume training page, but it's unlisted. So we will give you a link to this section on the YouTube page, but it won't be publicly available. We're keeping the hands-on this way for these sessions, as well as some other sessions that are running on Wednesday, which is hands-on with Maxon and Cinema 4D as well. So let me get that second link available to those of you who are asking for it. As this is an unlisted playlist. And Chad, you have some stuff that you wanted to go through at the beginning here. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm kicking this one off.
This is awesome. So what do we have in store?
Well, we're gonna start with like backing up and like looking at some basics of form and Mir and Tao for the next like 30 minutes. Also, I should probably start by apologizing because there was a mix-up. We were supposed to get the exercise files to you by 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, and I did that, but in a way that it was only in my private Dropbox, and the permissions didn't go out to everyone. So that's why they weren't there. That was totally on me, and it's my most sincere and humble apologies for that. We'll fix that and get that better for this coming week. So anyways, are you ready for me to just jump into it and do my thing?
Yes, I just wanted to answer a question in the thread from Thomas. He was asking for, is this being recorded, which it is. So probably about by tomorrow morning, you'll have a link. I'll give you guys all a private link to this session where you can go back and go hands-on if we move over something too quickly, along with the exercise files. On the second note, the Dropbox link I just shared for the exercise files for this week also contains last week's exercise files. So you can get everything from there, as well as everything from each future week. There is also a PDF that describes information of how we'll go through each of the sessions moving forward. And with that said, just continue forward. So let me just share that Dropbox one more time. I'm just sending this to all. Does everyone now see that in the actual area? You should be able to see it. So that's the actual Dropbox link to all of the exercise files. Okay, that has each of them. Awesome. So glad that you guys see that link. And in a few minutes, I'll also get you the link to the unlisted playlist that contains the hands-on recording. So just be on the lookout out for that. And Chad, I'll let you get started.
Sweet, buddy. And feel free to like interrupt if there's like questions or whatever. I kind of get like dialed into my own thing, but like if there's like questions or whatever, feel free to like just like completely interrupt and stop me or whatever. Are you going to like hand me over the screen or like how does that work?
I could do that, Chad.
I could show my screen.
Let me
Too, does that
get
work?
over here. I'd be honored to hand you over the screen. Hold on. Let's
I
get
do
here.
bequeath
To
onto
sharing,
the
change
screen.
presenter, and I just got to find you in this long list. I don't see your name for some reason.
Hmm.
Are you?
Oh, wait, it says my screen
You might
is.
be presenter. That's why I don't see your name. So
Oh,
if you just go to the top of the sharing, you should be able to just share your screen
okay.
in that section of the
It keeps
go-to
going
webinar.
back and forth between like saying my screen is showing and then not showing my screen. Is everyone seeing my screen, or is anyone seeing my After
I see your
Effects?
screen. There's a lovely gradient there,
Oh, okay,
and
okay.
what appears
Okay,
to be Trapcode Mir with my knowledge.
cool.
Wait,
Yeah, well, we'll work on that. This is Trapcode form, but
just kidding. This-
that was a valiant effort. No, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna start from scratch with form. One of the beefs, I have a couple beefs with Trapcode things that a couple challenges, a couple little mini hurdles, and one of them is that the default settings don't always invite you to play and explore and know exactly what's going on. So, the first, I don't know, maybe year that form was out, I saw this and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this mess of things? And you don't have to follow along here, but if I have a camera and I rotate this, it's much more clear what's going on. We talked last week about emitters and particles, those being like the two components that the way I view particle systems. And again, in form, we don't have emission. So we're not having particles born and die out. They just kind of like stay there. And so they are arranged in what's called a base form. So in lieu of an emitter, we have a base form, and then also we have all the particles. And so the base form in form by default is a grid. So we have a three-dimensional grid with only 3 particles in the z-axis and then a grid in the 2D axis. So that's why we get this kind of like funky look. Now, if you'd like to follow along with me, it's pretty cool. And if you're still waiting for the files to download, you could just open up just a default application of form. All that's different about this is that I have a sexy gradient in the background. That's really the only difference here. So we're just gonna be starting from scratch with form if you wanted to. Also, I made the exercise files kind of divided up. There's a Chad folder and a Nick folder, and I'm Chad, so we'll start in the Chad folder, and we're gonna go in order. So I'm going to open up the base form to adjust the form, and let's play with this grid. To make sure that we could see everything more clearly, I'm just going to take down the particles in Z just to 1, and then I'm going to increase the size X, Y, Z to see a bigger grid here. And then what I want to do is take down the number of particles. We have 70 in X and Y. And let's say I'll do maybe 20 by 20. And then what I want to do is fiddle with the actual particles themselves so we can see this. So I'll go into the particle section to adjust the way the particles look. And they're too tiny to really see what's going on. So I'm going to go to the size and increase the size there. Now, as I'm doing this, you can see that we have kind of like a feathered edge. By default, the sphere feather value is set to 50. By the way, the default particle type is sphere, is what you're seeing here, which is less of a sphere. Maybe they should call it a circle. I feel like it's more like a circle than a sphere. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take down the sphere to 0 so that we have like a hard edge here. Take down the size again. And then we have this kind of like array of circles. Now what's kind of cool is I could go over here to like opacity and increase opacity random. And boom, instantly we have this really cool texture. And you wouldn't think of this as a particle system, but it is a particle system. So form is just, again, I'm going to keep stressing this and you're going to get tired of hearing this over the next couple hours, but it's just so incredibly versatile with what it's able to do, to be able to create complexity and a bunch of different styles and looks very quickly. Now, if I play this, you'll notice that there's nothing happening. This isn't animated. We just adjusted the randomness of the opacity of each circle. But what if I wanted to have this be dynamic and kind of like the particles move like this? So what I could do, actually, I'm going to take down the randomness back to 0 so you can really see what's going on here. And the power of form is really in this fractal field. So we know about fractal noise, right? I'm just going to create a solid. Don't follow along with this here, but I'll just frac and then I'll just apply fractal noise. And so we know fractal noise. I'm going to be talking about it a bit in the next little half hour here. And we know fractal noise, and I'm going to go ahead and change the fractal type to max. And I'm going to take the complexity down to 1. Again, you don't have to follow along here, but essentially what fractal noise is, it takes these kind of organic patterns found in nature, these fractals that are repeated all the time. Like if you look at, a stream from space and you look at like a bolt of lightning, they look very similar. Like Mother Nature has like this, habitual way of doing things, and fractal noise tries to capture that, which is one of the reasons why it's so effective. So the complexity essentially is the layers of those noise, and that's what makes fractal noise such a great effect. It's not just noise, it's layers of noise, and complexity is like the layer setting. So when we go down to 1 on most complexities settings of most types of fractal noise, we could really see like a bare bones thing. As we set this to 2, you could more clearly see we now have 2 layers of noise. Take it to 3, now we have 3 layers of noise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as we keep upping this, then we have a lot of additional complexity here to our fractal noise pattern. And we can adjust almost like a repeater in shape layers. We can adjust the repeats, as it were, in the subsettings area. So unbelievable power with fractal noise here. And in form, we have a built-in invisible fractal noise field that we can use to do all kinds of magical stuff to our particles. So I open up fractal field, and really there's 3 main things that I use this for. You could use this fractal field to affect the size of the particles, where dark values make them bigger and light values make them smaller, or vice versa. I can never remember which is which because you can't really see it. So I don't know. But dark values make things stay the same, and then the opposite color makes it go smaller, or whatever. And then also we could do that with opacity. So as I increase effect opacity, we're having this invisible fractal field affect the opacity of all of these different particles here, and we could see that like a little bit more clearly. But the difference here, even though this kind of looks like the opacity random, the difference is that this fractal field behind the scenes auto animates. So as I preview this now, we actually get animation, which is pretty cool. So we could instantly, I've been talking for a few minutes, but really the simple steps, if we're going to start over from scratch, like we really just, took down the Z grid and took off the feather of the particles and added some effect opacity. And for creating this kind of randomness, it's super easy. Now we could also use this, I'll take this down. We could also use this again to affect the size. So as I increase this, you can see that we are affecting the size. So same thing, that fractal field is going through and affecting the size of the particles. And finally, the third thing, definitely not least, is this displace value. So as I increase displace, we're using that fractal field to displace these particles. So these 3 things allow us to use the fractal field to make sexy magic with form very, very quickly, and also very easily, because we don't have to set keyframes or anything. It's just built in. So the flow evolution value, by the way, controls the speed of the evolving of that fractal noise pattern. So what can we do with this? Actually, before I do that, let me show you another feature that's like really important in form, a really important thing for getting out of form. I'll put up the particle section. And one of the things with form that's kind of tricky is that like I might want these particles to get smaller and then bigger, or fade out at the end, or whatever, and it seems like I don't have any control over that. And I actually do in this opacity over area, in the opacity curve. So you'll see this throughout the UI a bunch of places. You'll see like a property and then over and a drop down menu, and then that same property curve. And so what I need to do in order to adjust this, I have to adjust the curve, and to turn that on, I have to adjust the opacity over. So let's say I want to adjust the opacity over the x-axis, the opacity across the x-axis. So I can change this to opacity over x. And then once I do that, then the curve shows up. And so I could open this up. So it's grayed out. If it's on off, this is grayed out. If it's set to one of these values, it will turn on. Now, in particular, we have these same curves, but they control the property over life. So from the birth of the particle to the death of the particle. And we don't have that here in form, obviously. So what this does is it controls across this axis. So if I click in here and I drag down to make this smaller, maybe make a ramp here, you could see that I've essentially told it that from left to right on this graph, the particles left to right, I want it to be no opacity and then fade into opacity here. And I could also click this little arrow here thing to flip this. So we start opaque and then go transparent. And then we also do that over a different axis. So over Y, for example. So then the left represents the top, and then the right side of the graph represents the bottom. So then we have this fade there. And we could do it Z, which won't do anything here because we don't have any depth in the Z axis right now because we only have one 2D sheet of particles. And we could also do this radially, which is interesting. So in this case, in radial, the left side of the curve represents the center of the form, and the right side represents the outer edges. So if we wanted something to kind of like fade away at the edges, this is how we would do it. And we could use these handy dandy presets if we wanted to. So instead of drawing this thing, I could have, started there, or I could have started there at the little bell curve, whatever I want. So that's important going forward. And I think I over prepared in this case. I just didn't want to like run out of stuff. You know what I mean? Like that's the worst, is like when I'm like, oh, I don't have anything else to show you. So I'm going to go through this next step pretty quickly. And I'm using some exercises that I did for a webinar a few months back. But the instructions are actually in here because I figured that like I might not have enough time. I might over prepare. So I have these instructions here on a lot of these tricks. So like, for example, you can use form to create this kind of like bokeh dust stuff. And so the instructions are here if you go frame by frame. So the first thing we want to do is add some disperse and twist, and that's basically it. And then you can adjust the camera, and there's some other tricks that you can try. But if you turn off this layer, the bokeh instructions, then you actually get to the composition with a solid layer ready to apply form, and you could start there. But essentially, if you want to create some bokeh, all you have to do is go into an area called disperse and twist, which is here, disperse and twist. And then like that takes those circles and makes them all dispersed. So if you want to create some like really cool effects like that, I mean, we're creating like a UI looking thing moments ago, or at least like a 2D flat art, and now we have this kind of like organic bokeh looking dreamy effect, which is really cool. We could put some optical glow, which is a favorite of mine, and we can do that there. And let me tone this down a little bit, but we can create these like really beautiful effects by just using form with a little bit of glow, and get some beauty really quick there. Let's see, I think we'll have time for this. One of my favorite things is creating like a fiery look from form. I was kind of fiddling around one time, and I got this, and yeah, it's pretty fun. So what I can do here is I'm going to go up to my base form, and we have a bunch of arrangements built in. We're going to be talking about these throughout the session this morning. But let's say I'll choose sphere, and there's 3 spheres because there's 3 sphere layers. So I'm going to take this down to 1. So we have just 1 sphere layer here. And I want to make this actually more dense. I'm going to start with 200 by 200, but we'll just do that. And then I'm going to take this particle color to, let's say like a deeper blue in the particle section. And then I want to change how they interact with each other. So I'm going to change the blend mode to add. And then I could go over here to the fractal field, and then I can displace them. And as I increase this, you can see that we have this cool thing. Now, one of the cool tricks with form that you see all the time is that this is displaced, and then as these displace, when they're in the add blend mode, you get these kind of like cool little pops of color. And as you increase how many particles there are, like the resolution, the density of these, then we get an even more gorgeous effect. It's pretty cool look. But to create the fire that I'm looking for, what I want to do actually is change the fractal strength over, because right now that fractal field is applying to the entire form. So if I choose fractal strength over Y, we could have it apply to just the top or just the bottom, or maybe like, a little bit more like so. So, I mean, this isn't, obviously done yet, but you could see how we're starting to create kind of like a ball of fire-ish, which is kind of cool. And so I'm just going to skip ahead to the final version here, but the settings are already here in this form alien fire final thing. And it's rendering. Wait for it. Well, oh, there we go. Okay, so you could see that like this is form. Now, a lot of people, if they were going to create like a fiery system like this, they would turn to particular because the particles move up or whatever. But then if you have particular, it's really hard to create this solid looking base that's kind of like displaced a little bit. But form gives you that flexibility. And again, this is why I love form so much, because you can create these kind of like cool tendrils and this fire, and also create the UI kind of stuff. Thanks, man.
I love it. That's such a unique way of using form. Like, I wouldn't first go towards form, like you said, I would go towards particular, but it's great what you were able to do with that, and just playing around with some of those properties to get a natural flow.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think and this is why my go-to is form, because it can do so much, and you don't have to worry about particles leaving. You can create objects that are whole and then parts that kind of like flake off of it or whatever. I just love form. So we're going to come back to form in a minute, but let's jump really quick into Trapcode Mir. This is one of those ones that like gets people hung up and whatnot. So again, the instructions are here in a lot of these examples in case we don't cover everything.
And Chad, just a quick question from someone. How did you remove the top of the sphere?
Okay, so that's actually a really good question. And I wasn't going to get into it because it's like technical, but here's the deal. It's kind of a trick, an optical trick, because what I did was I changed the XYZ linked to XYZ individual and actually made this more of like a capsule, and then maybe kind of like brought the size of these down. Oops. But more of like a capsule. And then what I did is I went into the particle, and then I went into opacity over Y, and then did like, nope, not that one, flip that. There we go. That type of thing. So what we're doing here is maybe make this lower transparent, and then make this like fully transparent, like that. But we want to get rid of all this down here, like make it completely transparent. So essentially, and then I also did that with same thing with the scale. I could go in here and click copy, and then go to size over Y, and then paste this. And this doesn't look fantastic, but so essentially the particles are getting smaller towards the top, and they're fading out towards the top, and that allows you to get these kind of like tendrils. Also, you want to go into the fractal field and adjust the flow Y so that they are moving up to a negative thing, and so that way it's kind of like moving up. So it takes some more fiddling, and we want to go into these like settings for like the fractal noise inside of form which is frustrating and confusing. And we also want to bump up the resolution so we're not seeing all of the little dots, but essentially that's the nuts and bolts of how you pull that trick off. Thank you, that's a good question. So for Mir is another one of those ones that just kind of like when you apply it, whoa, geez, what's going on here? Where's my Mir at? Oh, I didn't apply it yet. Let's go ahead and apply Mir. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so Mir is another one of those ones you look at and you're like, okay, this is kind of like the form thing, but it's like a little bit more janky and crinkly, and I don't know what to do here, and I'm gonna go do something else. But actually, if you want to create some like beautiful fabric, all you really have to do is change the shader to flat and then add a light. So if I go to Mir and I've already added a light, so I can go into the shader section. And by default, the shader is set to density. So remember we talked about last week that Mir just creates like a sheet of geometry. So the sheet exists in 3D, but there's no thickness to it. So we can move it around and displace it and do all kinds of cool stuff. And by default, again, the shader is density, which is like a silky type deal. But if I change this to smooth, then we actually are creating a smooth piece of geometry here. And maybe I take the blend mode from add so that this thing is adding on top of itself to just like a normal thing. And then we don't have enough geometry. So I can go back up to the geometry and increase the vertices to give it more density here. And then another thing that I like to do is go down to the bottom with the rendering. Yes, Dwayne, sorry, brain overload. I apologize. I'm really making everyone drink from the fire hose today. I just got so excited about all this stuff. Like, oh, I can show them this. I can show them this. So I apologize. So I take super sample, which kind of helps with the anti-aliasing. You get these kind of like weird anti-aliasing things, and taking super sample to 4x will help with some of that. Also, this depth buffer, sometimes turning it on or off can fix some of that stuff as well. But essentially now we have this like fabric essentially, and I could go into the fractal area, and Mir, like form, has a fractal field that works behind the scenes. So by default, the amplitude's set to 50, and we could increase the amplitude or turn it down. And we could also decrease or increase the frequency to adjust the size of that. And then we also have the evolution parameter, just like in fractal noise. So as we increase this, we can create water, we can create all kinds of magical stuff. I'm just going to go through the final examples here. Again, the instructions are in there how to do this, but here we created some kind of like faceted ribbon in the background as like a texture, and then we just changed like one setting here. And the instructions are how to do this here. You basically just, again, change the shader to smooth. And then that creates, if we take this shader to smooth with the faceted stuff, then we create this kind of like smooth, satiny fabric. One other cool trick about Mir, and I'm not going to dig too deep into this, but you can use another layer to control the fractal map. So I talked about how like there's fractal noise behind the scenes in form, blah, 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 and how there is in Mir. But Mir actually gives you the ability to control what that fractal shape is. And that is very, that is very, very, very powerful. So what I'm going to do here, let's see, I have some, now it's a blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah. So I have fractal noise, just simple default settings. I didn't do anything to it. I can go into Mir, and then I'm going to go into the fractal section. And the amplitude layer, I'm going to choose the fractal map, which is again just fractal noise. And I'm going to choose masks and effects, or effects and masks. And now this displacement is being controlled by the fractal map. I'm going to take frequency down to like 1, and then I might bump up the amplitude. Can't really see very much, and so this doesn't seem like it works sometimes. But what I really have to do here is add a light, and I'm going to add bluish light. And can't see anything just yet. What I'm going to do back to Mir, Let's go back to geometry and add a little bit more detail. Right now there's only 50 vertices in X and Y, but as I start to bump this up and then go back and maybe play with the amplitude a little bit more, we start to see what's going on. And maybe I'll rotate this. And you see what's going on there. See that we're actually creating this. Ooh.
Looks like a landscape.
Yeah, it does look like a landscape. And people use Mir to create landscapes all the time, and it's pretty awesome. Now, this shader thing we talked about before, the density creates this kind of like semi-transparent satiny thing. But if I take this to smooth, again, we get a more smooth thing. And also I want to take the blend from add, which is default, which creates these kind of like cool highlights, great for motion graphics. But I can take this to normal, and then my light disappears and I look like a fool. No, but what I need to do is get my light back. There we go. There we go. Yes. Now, there's a lot more I could do to play with this, but what I wanted to show you was that my fractal noise layer is now driving the three-dimensional displacement of Mir. So now I could actually go back to my fractal map if I know fractal noise, and I could change like the noise type, for example, to block, and take the complexity down to like 1. And then we could use these settings. We could, adjust the scale, whatever we want to do to create these like three-dimensional. You have to follow along here. I'm just going to make a camera really quick, and that didn't work. That made everything disappear. Okay, I won't fiddle with that. But we can use this, our settings with fractal noise, because it's now controlling the 3D displacement, and we can fiddle with that to create anything from landscapes to kind of like these like greeble, mechanical, whatever, and whatever in between. Another example I have here is a texture map that I made in Houdini. And let me see if I can preview that really quick. Yeah, so here's the texture map I made in Houdini. It looks like that. It's just a black and white map. You can make them in Photoshop or whatever you want to do. But then I applied that to Mir, and this is an actual, like, I mean, the resolution is like ridiculous crazy, so I'm not going to like try to move this around, but this is an actual like 3D surface. And I could go in and play with the lights on it and whatever. So
and this is in the fractal maps in Mir 07 composition, right, Chad? If I'm seeing it correctly, if anyone wanted to open that up right now,
yes,
this example.
Yes,
cool.
And so it's just an example. It's not like a hands-on like step-by-step thing, but this is kind of like on the cooking show. Like this is like the final product, like what else you can do with it. But yeah. So again, it's this three-dimensional. I love seeing that I can light this texture in After Effects in 3D. I could move a camera around it, whatever, and it's made in Mir. That's awesome. Okay, so let's go now to the 03 folder, the Trapcode DAO, and talk about Trapcode DAO just for a brief second. I'm going to open up the 08A DAO intro start composition. And DAO is another one of those ones. Also, Nick, I know I'm like going short on time, and so I'm trying to like rush through this here. But the DAO intro, or excuse me, the DAO effect is another one of those ones that kind of like we were talking about last week when we were talking to Nate, the product manager. It's tough to wrap your head around, for me anyways, of what you can do with it, but it's such a cool, powerful effect. So essentially what DAO does is that it takes 3D geometry and wraps it around a path. And essentially, like, that's all it is. So if you get lost with all the stuff that's going on in DAO, which is very easy to do, just remember that it's a path and then 3D geometry around that path. So it's kind of like 3D stroke, but 3D stroke. And so here's the basis of what you need to know about Tao. There are 3 different ways to generate the paths that Tao uses, and those are found at the top in the path section. And then there's the segment section, which controls the 3D geometry. Everything else below segment is basically just to make Tao sexier. We can add materials, we can play with lighting, we could add, we could repeat it and do all kinds of stuff with duplicating of this, but essentially the first 4 is really what you need to know to get started with Tao. You have the path, and then you have the 3D geometry in segment. So this is the default setting of Tao. If I open up Path Generator, you can see that by default, the path generator is on. It's generating a path, as you can see by this little check mark here, and it's generating a circle by default. There are also 2 other options here. We could have it generate the path or use a line as a path, and we could also have it use a fractal as a path. And basically, this is just kind of like, think of like, we talk about fractal noise, but imagine just kind of like a path distorted by fractal noise. So it's kind of like twisting and turning in an organic way on itself. Doesn't look like much of anything right now, but we'll get to that. And actually, go ahead and leave it on fractal for now. We can adjust the size of the path here with the size option. And I'm going to go ahead and enable taper size, because then we could see the beginning and end of our line here. We could also evolve the fractal with the fractal evolution. And I'm going to move this around. Now, the benefit of Tao is you start playing with it, you realize this thing renders really fast, really fast. So you can just like dynamically scroll and scrub and have all this stuff happen in real time. And it's a really great way to play with 3D geometry without some of the performance hits that you get otherwise.
I totally agree with you. Like, that's one of its biggest benefits in After Effects, is how fast this actually works, and with the lightweight 3D geometry, and why you might want to question, okay, well, why wouldn't I go into Cinema 4D? In certain workflows, I would say After Effects might be the one composition that you want to stay in the most for what you're doing. And if you're looking for some added elements or some basic 3D elements where you can warp the geometry and do that extremely fast, utilizing After Effects' speed as well as Tao, that's a great reason to use it.
Yeah, I agree. Tao is so cool. I actually got to write the user guide for Tao when it first got released. So I got to spend a lot of time with it, and it's just like, God, the creators put so much effort into everything. It just works so well, and it's such a fun creative tool to play in. If I have taper set and I'm in Fractal, I can change the start and the end of the path, so I can make these lines kind of grow on. So if I took end path from 100 down to 0, you could see this like path kind of growing on, which is really cool. Again, kind of like stroke, which is fun. Now, I'm going to leave this as is and then go into, well, there's another couple ways to generate paths too. We can generate paths from lights, and we can also generate paths from masks, which is awesome. I'm not going to show that here, but I'm going to go into the segment menu and just show you a little bit more about the geometry that you're extruding along this path. The default is to extrude an n-gon. So it takes a piece of 3D geometry and extrudes it along the path. And we could change those settings here. And we could also repeat an n-gon. So we could take a piece of geometry and repeat it along the path. So it's not one contiguous piece, it's just like little chunks. And then we could also repeat a sphere. And as you can see here, we don't really have too many segments. Actually, no, sides. So if I increase the sides, we start having something that looks a little bit more spherical. There we go. And so we have these spheres. Now you can see how much geometry that I have, all of these spheres with all this geometry, and still we could go back to the path here, there, the path generator, and take down the end path, and it's just like real time, easily real time. It's just incredible. So there's a lot we can do here with playing around with this. I'm just going to show you some few examples in 08B in the Trapcode DAO folder. Here's like playing with some of the settings and some of the lighting to create this kind of like pasty something. I don't know. I mean, I could go into my evolution and just kind of move that around like that. See again how quickly this renders. There's also repeater in DAO. So if I go to the 9comp DAO repeater, this is probably the most famous thing that I've ever made because they have this in the DAO video. And I'm like, it's pretty cool. But essentially, if I go into the repeat paths, we have just like a built-in repeater in the first repeater area. Again, I'm in the 09 DAO repeater comp. And this looks like a cool sci-fi hallway. And I think that the camera animates. Yeah, so the camera animates. So like we zoom into this like sci-fi tunnel. But actually, if I take down the number of repetitions, you can see here in the repeat pass first repeater, there's 76 repetitions. And as I take this down, well, let me just take it down to like 5. You can see this just like the same thing we've been dealing with, just like a little like extruded tube, fractal. But as I start to increase the repetitions, then it starts to go out of the light. And you could also use materials to create these like dynamic HDR reflections. And so we have this tunnel effect, which is pretty cool. Also, if I go into the DAO textures, yeah, I'm not gonna take the time to do this because I'm over my time, but you could apply textures, and there's even like a normal map here for you to play with. But you could apply a normal map to actually displace the geometry of DAO, which is something that you can't do in any other tool in the Trapcode suite, but maybe in After Effects. It's rare to find a tool that can use normal maps to do 3D displacement, and you can do that here with these shapes. You can also apply 3D textures and whatever. There's also on your own time, there's other DAO examples that most of these I created for the user guide, so they might look familiar if you looked at the user guide. So for example, here's like using a light path to create this path with this R, and there's also repeater, and you could use color layers to assign color to the repeaters, and it's fully 3D, which is fun. And this is tons and tons of stuff going on. There's a million repeated little triangles and then repeated, and it still renders like super snappy. It's incredible. Anyways, bunch of stuff here to play with. I'm going to go over this just like very quickly and then pass it back off to Nick. What we want to get into is using 3D-ness with the Trapcode suite. And we've kind of started bridging that gap when we talked about Mir and its displacement, and also DAO and what it extrudes on the path. But form and Mir and particular all can use actual 3D objects. And Nick is going to get into this a bit more, so I don't want to steal his thunder. But in form, where it's really handy, actually, there's some instructions on how to do more of a tutorial here. But in the 11A, the chapter or the 4 folder 11A.
So Chad, just to double check, because it seems like with the instructions, just for clarification here, inside the comp, you have a locked text layer, and that text layer kind of goes through the steps. Am I correct?
The locked text layer doesn't. There's a pre-comp.
So there's a pre-comp that you have to turn on for the instructions. Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
So in all the things with instructions, the layer is already on, and it's pre-comped, so that way you wouldn't have to deal with all the layers of the steps inside of that comp. So you just have to turn off the pre-comp at the top, and then it will turn off.
Awesome.
But essentially what I can do is in form, oh wait, I didn't apply form yet to this. I'm just going to hand it off to you because I think you're going to share the same things, Nick. And I've gone over a little bit. And then
we can also come back to yours too, because like we're talking about 3D in general.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And I'm going to steal your screen, man.
Yeah. How do I surrender it to you?
You don't even have to. I can just, I am now sharing my screen, and everyone will be amazed to see Cinema 4D there. So I just want to take everyone through what we're going through. So this is going to be sort of a step-by-step exercise, and there's 3 components involved. And even if you don't have all the components, I have a prepared asset for you in the composition that we'll reference. So what we need to kind of go through all of the steps is Mixamo. That's a free online app if you have it included, if you have an Adobe subscription. So we can just head to the website and log in. You can start to do that now in the background. The other thing that you need is Cinema 4D S24. Again, I have a prepared file if you don't have this, but this is going to be where we're going to add an animation to our Mixamo character using something from the asset browser. And then the last step is to hop inside of After Effects, where we'll be referencing this file inside of Trapcode particular, and also just make sure that we do all the right steps to grab onto this 3D model and see what we have to do to get everything started. Now, before that, like Chad, you were kind of going into a bit of a description about 3D models in general. And there happens to be a parallel between particular and form. And one is if we hop into right now, I'm in the project panel, and in the exercise files that you've downloaded, there's a Nick folder. And in that Nick folder, there's a Mixamo Man Cineware 3D workflow begin comp. Inside that comp, there is a spectacular point emission happening, but don't worry, we're gonna make it better. And there's also a Cinema 4D file, which is the steps to get where there's already like a pre-animated Mixamo character for you to look at for any reason that you're missing Cinema 4D S24 as well as Mixamo, so we can follow along from that step. So in particular, just like in form, if we were wanting to reference a 3D model, one way to do it is to hop inside the designer. So inside my comp, I've selected the solid. I'm clicking on the designer button. And on my primary system, we saw a lot of this last week. I'm currently clicking on the emitter type. And over here where we can see all of the block information, I'm just going to switch the emitter type from point to 3D model. And it's here, this exact same step that you would perform inside of form, where you can choose a preset or a model that exists inside of Trapcode. So all of these 3D models, in fact, there's 50 items which are just simple primitive geometry, and then there's some Pixel Lab objects that you can utilize, will allow you to work with this 3D model right away. The other piece of the puzzle is adding a new model, which you can do directly from in the designer or from inside of After Effects, which could either be an OBJ object or image sequence or a Cinema 4D file. But to import that Cinema 4D file, we're going to have to take a few steps for preparation, specifically if there is animation attached. Now, just for now, I'm going to select this sphere strips. And we're going to press OK and not be very impressed with what we see inside of the designer. And one thing I like to do at the beginning is head to the motion block once we choose a preset and really just bring down the velocity. So this is step 1, bringing down the velocity to 0, 0, 0, so we can start to see what the 3D model looks like. The second step, and this is also good for fluids, which we're going to cover in another week, is to head to the emitter type where under particles per second, I'm just going to crank this up to 5,000. And we should see I thought I would have seen a huge increase in particles, but for some reason I'm not. So let me just make that 20,000. There we go. So here we have 20,000 particles that are forming along this 3D object. If we're going to particular, and Chad, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, you'd probably want to have some motion to these particles. So we can get to this step inside of form where no particles are moving and are just going to be stagnant to the object. Well, in particular, they're being emitted from the object, which we discussed last week. However, with a handy little graph, it's actually under the motion block. I'm going to go back in and set the velocity to 200. And again, we saw last week that if we choose a velocity curve preset here, let me choose this preset and then reverse this, we should see that this starts with 0 velocity and then eventually over time gets to full velocity. This is obviously too strong, so let me just bring this to an amount of 20, where no velocity and then it gradually emits outward. And if we want to start to design this even further, rather than have these particles emit in all directions, we can change this from uniform to something like directional. And directional will just limit these particles to one particular direction. You can see that a bit better if I now increase the velocity and actually use the camera in the designer. You can press C to do that or click on this button and then rotate around the 3D object so you can see the direction it's emitting in, because it's not quite clear when you do that right off the top. Okay, so I'm actually going to cancel out of here and let's head into Mixamo. So the reason I'm using Mixamo is it's just an easy way of getting a 3D object. And what I want to do here online is emit particles from this guy. And in this case, if you've used Mixamo before and you've logged in, first of all, there's two sections. One is there's a characters tab where we can choose from one of several pre-built characters. So I'll just load up Remy here and give this a second to hopefully load. I'm going to reset this and try this again. Okay, I'll click on Remy, use that character, give it a second to load. And here is Remy in a T-pose. We can move around him. And the next step is if we wanted to just use Mixamo, so we could choose from a bunch of preset animations. So these are different types of movement that we can add to the character. But in this case, I want the character, or whatever character I decide to bring in to Cinema 4D, S24, to be in a T-pose. Because as of S24, in fact, the version just before, there's a bunch of motion capture presets that we can attach to this character and give it our own movement. And the benefit of that is that it's easier to select control if we ever need to go into the animation and the keyframing. So with my Mixamo characters, I'm going to choose right now, for this example, I think there's a few, I'm looking for a zombie type character. So I'll choose Romero. And since I'm already logged into Mixamo, I'm going to click on this download button, accept it as a T-pose, and get or grab this FBX binary file. I'll just download it to the system. Slightly, I believe this one over 100 megabytes in terms of download, so it might just take a few seconds, but regardless, I have another copy on my system that we can look at. So that's the Mixamo step. The next step here is I'm going to hop inside of Cinema 4D once that's downloaded. And the trick to get this in is to go to the File menu. We're going to merge project. And I'm going to head to my Downloads folder where I have this guide, this non-pbr.fbx. That's the name of the file from the download from Mixamo. I'll choose to open that, and we should see a pop-up dialog come over here, these FBX 2020.1 import settings. The defaults are fine, so I'm going to press OK. And then this next menu that comes up, which says, do you want to reassign included takes? I'm going to choose no. And we should see in the middle of the Cinema 4D scene, our character in his T-pose comes inside. Just checking in, does everyone still see my screen? Chad, do you see it fine?
Yep, everything's been perfect.
I'm just checking to make sure I'm not chatting, talking with myself. So
We're
it's
here
happened
for
a couple times before.
We're here.
Thanks. So here's my my T-posed character. I'm just using the 3 key to rotate around him. And again, I want to use one of those pre-built motion captures that comes with the asset browser in Cinema 4D. Before I do that, what I need to do is actually take this Mixamo character rigs data and have Cinema 4D reference it or extract that information. Now to do this, we need to use the actual character rig, which is going to show up in the object manager. It's this Mixamo rig 5 : hips. And if I right click this, the tag that we want to add happens to be from the rigging tag section. And we're looking to add to it a character definition tag. Once this tag is added and selected, in the attributes manager, we can see the character definition tag information, and then this one button here, which is to open the character definition manager. It's here where it's already seen all of the different elements that make up this rig, the torso, the left arm, the right arm. And in order to extract this Mixamo skeleton, all we have to do is click this button up here, extract skeleton. In order to make sure that Cinema 4D has seen it correctly, we'll get a number down here at the bottom saying it's extracted all of those objects. Cool. So now that we have this, we can now apply some basically some motion capture information to it, courtesy of the asset browser in S24. So to access this, we can go to the window menu, and here's the asset browser, Shift F8. I've already have it docked to the left of my viewport. And it's here where I want to grab from the motion capture folder. You'll see a dedicated folder specifically for motion capture. And they added to this in the last few versions, but these are all different types of motion captures that you can apply to character rigs in Cinema 4D. So I think with this zombie character that I've chosen, something zombie-ish should be added. I can see at the very bottom a zombie walk here. I can in fact make these bigger so we can see that clearer. Zombie walk. I like the one here at the end. So I'm gonna, with this selective, I already actually downloaded this. But if you don't have it downloaded on your system, all you have to do is click on the cloud icon. And now that's gonna be available for you. Then once you have the motion capture data that you want, all you have to do is apply it to the object manager. So I'm just dragging it directly in there. And we can see the zombie walk end is already in a null. And here's all that motion capture data. Here is the character and his rig right here. And the Mixamo 5 rig is the character definition that I drew from the zombie. So the next step is to basically take this zombie walk data, which we can't quite see, but I'm going to zoom out on my screen and we should see this like rig character over here at the side. Chad, do you see that?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, I do see that. This is awesome. I didn't know that you could transfer. I guess maybe I knew there was probably a way, but I had no idea that you could transfer the motion capture stuff in the asset browser to like a Mixamo character. That's awesome.
Yeah, and we can now also then bring it over to After Effects, which I think is super cool. So to get this motion capture data over to my character, the next step is to actually go back to the original Mixamo rig 5 hips, which I'm going to right click and add yet another tag. This tag under the rigging tags is going to be the character solver. And you'll see that with that tag selected after it's applied to the Mixamo rig 5 hips, it's looking for a source character. And the source character we want to give it is this zombie walk end. And in S24, these rigs actually include character definition tags, and we can grab this tag and then basically drag it directly to the source character. So just walking through that step again, I grabbed the character definition tag from the motion capture, the zombie walk null, and applied it to the motion solver tag. And if you noticed, I have a little update here with my zombie character in the scene. He looks in the exact same position as the previous motion capture rig. And I can just press play and see him move across the screen.
It's amazing.
Yeah, we got a kind of cool motion. And by the way, there's a ton of stuff that you can do in the animation layout to loop various motion captures. So if you needed it to be extended for more than 90 frames that's currently here inside our existing projects, we could do that by playing around with different keyframe end values. But to get this over to After Effects, since this is a particle section, I think that would be good, right, Chad? Yeah, we should get this over to After Effects and have it referenced
Skin
by
spinning.
Cinema 4D. So to do that, what I've done is I'm actually selecting everything that's currently in my object manager. And with everything selected, I'm going to switch layouts from the startup to the animate. Since I had everything selected, we can see a few of those items up here, down here in the timeline dope sheet. And sometimes these rigs are essentially After Effects needs to see keyframes in order for it to apply Trapcode, or for Trapcode particular, the particle system, to be attached to the 3D model. So in order to do that and to make sure that this animation is accepted, with these rigs selected, I'm going to do the following, which is go to this function menu and choose Bake Objects. This will change this data into keyframes. And you'll notice I have quite a few things checked here. I'm going to bake expressions and also make sure to include all parameters. So with those checked, I'll choose OK. Cinema 4D will start to bake this information and actually produce 2 additional objects in the object manager, which are named copy. And it's the copies that have this extra keyframe data that is super important for Trapcode to see. This is required specifically if we are going to reference a Cinema 4D file inside of After Effects, not necessarily necessary if you send out an OBJ image sequence. So you could export out an image sequence and it will do some of this for you on that export. But this is specifically for that Cinema 4D workflow. Okay, so now to get this over to After Effects, I'm just going to do a few things. I'm actually just to clean up this file. Everything that is copy is what I want to keep. So I'm going to go in here and delete everything that's not a copy. And this is the data that we need anyways. And if I just press play, you'll notice that that information and the movement still carries over. Now the final step. When we save the Cinema 4D file, we have to make sure that it is a Cineware file. And you can do that from the File menu. And one way is Save Project for Cineware. We save this with the baked animation data of our T-posed Mixamo character, which we added an actual motion capture information from inside of Cinema 4D that's included in S24. Pretty sweet. Now we can bring this in and have it referenced by Trapcode particular. What's a good name for this Cinema 4D file, Chad?
Oh man, I so suck at the on the spot naming things. Something about a zombie and Trapcode, something.
Zombie walk Trapcode? I like that.
Hands-on zombie.
Hands-on, I don't know.
That
I
sounds
don't know.
mildly.
Yeah. Zombie walk Trapcode. Okay. And I'm gonna save this now. Okay. And let's hop inside of After Effects. Okay, for the last step. So if you're feeling left out because you don't have S24, and again, Mixamo, just to keep in mind, in this original composition, this Mixamo Man Cineware 3D workflow begin, I've included a Cinema 4D file actually here. We should see, if all goes well, I don't think I see the character, but we should have seen a character here. I'll have to grab you guys a new one, but there should have been a Mixamo Cineware character here. It doesn't seem to be referencing that. Anyhow. Going back to particular here, under the project panel, I'm going to grab from the desktop the zombie walk. Zombie walk Trapcode. We spent all that time naming it. So I'm going to press open, and here the zombie walk Trapcode Cinema 4D file shows up, and I'll just drag it into this project. By the way, this is a 1280 by 720 file. Those are the default settings of your Cinema 4D file. for any reason that you wanted to switch that to something like 1920, in Cinema 4D, if I just bring that up quickly, you could see that there's a gear icon on the top right-hand corner now of S24. And it's here where we can go to the output section and change the width and height of the Cinema 4D project, as well as the length and a few other things if we needed to. Okay, back in After Effects, everyone sees the zombie. By the way, we get this floor grid based on the Cineware options that come in here by default. I'm just going to change this to current. Now we can see the zombie by himself and particular here. For this, I actually want, with the Cinema 4D file selected, to extract the scene data. And what this is going to do is give me the default Cinema 4D camera that's invisible in the scene, and then just now it's inside of After Effects. Now, once I do this, particular has now disappeared. And that's because the world coordinates of After Effects are different from Cinema 4D. So one way to get the particle system so the camera sees it is just to take our position under the emitter section and zero out these coordinates. And now we should see that relatively those particles are in that 000 mark with our zombie. You can move on any other frame besides the first frame to get a reference of the default point-based emitter. Okay, now let's get these particles on our zombie. Step 1, under emitter type in the emitter section, I'm going to choose 3D model. Step 2, in After Effects, if we scroll down in that category to the model emitter section, I'll change the 3D model from, well, actually over to the zombie walk Trapcode. We should see, let me actually turn off the zombie so we could kind of start to see what's going on, a bunch of particles that seem like they're kind of forming across our zombie character. Now, just like we saw with the original 3D model that I showed inside of the designer, in the emitter section, we want to just zero out all of the velocity values, get a better sense for how these particles are being born on this object. The other thing we'll do temporarily is crank up the amount of particles per second. I'm going to make this 5,000. Now, the next step is in the model emitter section that we were just in, After Effects tries to normalize the 3D world for Cinema 4D in this case. And we don't want it to do this when it's referencing the 3D model. It's trying to normalize that OBJ or Cinema 4D world for After Effects. We kind of have already done it, and we have a Cinema 4D camera in our project. So we're going to deselect the normalize button, and all of a sudden those particles now seem to be much closer. In fact, they are much closer. If I just turn on my zombie character here, bunch of particles pretty much forming around the zombie. Sweet. Okay. I'm going to close out the emitter section on particular, and under the particle section, we can play with a few things. I'm going to play with the size of the particles. I'm going to set that to 1 to make them nice and small. And the lifespan of 3 seconds seems just about right. Okay. To turn off the Cinema 4D file for a second, the next thing to note is that if we go back to the emitter section, the emitter size turns off because we've normalized or turned off the normalize button here. So it's pretty much mapping to the size of our zombie character those particles are being born. Now, if when I reference a 3D character, especially with animation, sometimes because we're utilizing a Cinema 4D file, you might have some problems with playback. And one thing that I suggest, and I do this quite a bit with various After Effects compositions, is there's a preview panel. For any reason that you don't see it, we can go to the window menu and bring up preview. I'll just dock it actually here to the side of the composition window. One of my favorite buttons here is the skip section, where you skip a certain amount of frames in After Effects, but then with that skipping of frames, it allows you to have a little bit of a quicker playback, which can be very handy when you're trying to reference those Cinema 4D files, as well as builds particle systems that just have quite a large amount of particles being emitted. Okay. Now, what I wanted to show is if I hop around my current time indicator, we should see that these particles are in fact moving with our zombie that's walking. So the animation has been accepted by Particular. I mean, it's just a blob right now, but that's what's happening. Now, to have some movement of these particles, rather than have them just stick to our character, let's do a few things. One is I'm going to change the direction of this particle system under the emitter from uniform to directional. And now I'll start to introduce a little bit of velocity. Let's make it 300. We now see that these particles are emitting away, like from our zombie character. It's just leaving a trail of, what is this? What is he emitting, Chad?
Disease and pestilence.
Disease, yeah. So I'm going to make it a little bit less there. I'm going to make it 1,000 in terms of the particles per second. And now we have this stream of particles based on our directional emission, just being emitted from behind him. Now, because we're going into physics in more detail next week, rather than just have this sort of straight emission backward, I did want to show that we could head into this environment section, right? This is just a little bit lower inside the particular settings here, and introduce a little bit of air turbulence. What air turbulence in environment is going to do is going to affect the position of these particles so they just don't go on a completely straight path. How this is slightly different from fast physics is that this is going to change the new position of these particles all the way. Like there's no temporary change in position. The old fast physics relied on almost like a fractal field that would be causing the turbulence and the changing of position of these particles. Now, this is a new physical simulation, which is going to completely change the position of the particles based on the turbulence that we entered. So their trajectories, or wherever they're being emitted to, is going to change over time till the very end. But now, yeah, we have a bunch of particles being emitted from our lovely 3D character here backward with a little bit of turbulence as well. How is everyone doing?
So many tricks. That's really, really cool. Hey, John had a really good question that I was actually wondering as well. Do you know offhand if it's possible to import FBX files into C4D Lite?
I do not know that. That's a great question. I can get you the answer for that, but we'll have to take that question for after. I'm not sure if FBX will go into Cinema 4D Lite.
And I thought, do you know if there's another? I mean, John's question ultimately was like, can you use Mixamo with Cinema 4D Lite? But
yeah,
I guess FBX was my question but is there another format that Mixamo spits out? It seems like there is, but it doesn't work very well for me.
It's like FBX. I think there's a few different formats that Mixamo spits out. FBX is like one of the main ones. Does it do? There's another file format that it does for AR workflows too, send to Arrow. And I forget, and this might be acceptable by Cinema 4D as well. I forget what the name, but when you send this to Arrow, if you have a Creative Cloud library, you can actually see the file type. It's just, I'm drawing a blank to what the extension is. However, this would kind of create a AR file type that should be also accessible by various applications that support AR, not to mention Cinema 4D too. And then in terms of the download, I stepped by here. We've got FBX.
Collada.
Collada is the actual extension, which I haven't really used or had a good experience when I did try that. I just tried different versions of FBX in some cases, depending on where you were sending it to.
Collada was like the universal, supposedly universal file format to replace OBJ, and it failed pretty bad. But I will say, I mean, it's just like a total wild guess, but from what I've seen from C4D Lite, the restrictions are in the features in Cinema 4D and not in the input and output settings that I've seen. So maybe, but like a more like a hopeful maybe, like, you know, a more optimistic maybe.
It's a great question. And I'm just going to answer maybe as well, because we'll have to find out. But I will get you the answer to that question if you wanted to reach out to me after. I'll put my email in the thread.
Sweet.
So,
all right. How do I? Are you ready for me to do my thing now?
yeah, you have something to say about sprites, right? Am I correct?
Yes. I'm gonna do. Let's see. I'm gonna show my screen. Tell me when this works. Oh wait. Here we go.
I can see your screen.
Beautiful. Okay, here we go. Oh, Ryan said he tried and couldn't get it to work. Oh, but Ryan, quick question. Did you couldn't get it to work because Cinema 4D said no, C4D Lite said no, we won't import FBX files, or it didn't like work well with like the settings, it didn't look good? Because the FBX stuff is such a mess. It's such a mess. You have to have like the exact right FBX and whatever. So it might not necessarily be a problem with C4D Lite. Yeah, curious about that. Okay, so if you'd like to follow along with me, I'm in the 04. Okay, looks like Lite does not import FBX. Eric is reporting either use full C4D or Blender. Okay. Thank you guys for your research there. So in the Chad folder, I'm Chad, and then there's the comps, and then 04 3D objects. You could open up the 11A instant 3D particles with form. There should be like a little instruction thingy here at the beginning. You can turn off the visibility of that top layer. There's also a form layer. Go ahead and apply Trapcode form to the form layer. It's just basically a blank solid. Make sure that there's the visibility there. That layer's turned on, and apply form to it. There's already a blend mode there. So like normally it's in the normal blend mode and that's what it looks like, but I knew that I would be making it sexier. So like right midway through, the blend mode is overlay. So turn that to overlay. That's really all we have here. Just form its default settings, and then, you know, it kind of looks kind of cool like this. So that's all that's done to it. So what I wanted to show you is that you could actually use 3D objects, not only in particular, but in form and Mir as well. And because particular and form and Mir are all different and do different things, 3D objects do different things in each of those things. So as Nick showed you, when you use 3D objects in particular, those 3D objects are an emitter. Like they emit particles in the shape of a 3D object. And as we talked about, form, instead of having emitters in form, you arrange particles into a base form. And so in form, you could actually use 3D objects as your base form. So in this drop down here, I can choose here, instead of box or sphere like we talked about, they actually use a 3D model. And I can click on choose model to get the model browser. And I have this like high DPI on my Windows thing, and Windows kind of bites with high DPI. So this is like ridiculously tiny. It's like the Zoolander 3D models browser. But I can go ahead and choose, let's say pyramid. So I click on pyramid in this browser. It's in the just main area here, geometry. So I could select the pyramid and click OK. And there we have it. I mean, the gradient, again, is coming from the blend mode because it's blending into the background. But we have this three-dimensional object that just exists. And so I could adjust the Y rotation if I wanted to and spin this around. But it's basically now taken the particles of form and arranged them into the shape of a 3D object. So if you're trying to get a 3D object made out of particles, like my first choice would be to be Trapcode form, because then you don't have to really fiddle with velocity and all those different things. You can just kind of like have the particles exist, which is really handy for creating like holograms and all kinds of stuff. And I can go into size maybe and take this down a little bit. maybe move up the position. You don't have to do this, but just for design's sake. And then also in the base form, once you choose a 3D model, you can go into 3D model settings, and you can actually choose a 3D object in your comp if you want to from this drop down. But something that's just really important very quick is the particles from. By default, the particles are coming from the edges, but we could also have particles come from the vertices, which creates points. We could also have particles come from the faces, which creates particles on each face. And be careful of this for dense models, because this gets kind of ridiculous. And then also you could have particles that fill the volume, which is interesting. And on a lot of models, like in this one here, faces and volume can look very similar, but rest assured that they are very different and can create different effects. Also, this particle density is very cool. Let's go to faces. I could take this down and have less density on those particles. I could also change. Say what again?
I love this feature. The ability to play with the density, especially when you have models that have a lot of geometry.
Yes.
On like the faces or the volumes.
Yes. It's fantastic. And a lot of times too, you know how like in Spinal Tap, like the amps go to 11, the particle density is like driven by Spinal Tap essentially. Like you can go above 100%. Now in this case of vertices, like there aren't more vertices, but sometimes if you're filling a volume at 100%, it might not fill it enough. So in a lot of cases, you can actually take particle density over 100% in order to fill it more if you need more particles. So very flexible, very well implemented. And then you could even go in here to particle and maybe let's say change it to square, the particle type to square, and increase the size. And so now we have a pyramid of squares, so then this is a totally different effect as well. So a lot of cool stuff with that. I'm going to now go into the same folder for 04 3D objects and 12 OBJs in Mir. Essentially, just want to show you this really quick. Oh, it's already done for you. Essentially, though, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to, you don't have to follow along here, but I'm going to go ahead and click the reset button to reset Mir. So we have just the regular default Mir, and you can see it's kind of like rotated in 3D space here. But all the stuff that I was showing you previously about Mir is because we have base geometry set to plane, but we could also set the base geometry of Mir to a 3D model. And so then we could go down to the 3D model settings, just like we do in particular and form, and choose the model, which in this case is the Mir OBJ master. There we go. And that's kind of fun. But you can see the difference here between particular, form, and Mir when it comes to bringing in 3D objects, because particular, again, is the emitter. Form arranges particles in a 3D shape, but Mir, because it's 3D mesh, actually makes a 3-dimensional object that you can light and texture and change the reflection of and whatnot. And then you could come down here to the texture layer and choose a texture layer and actually bring in a UV map texture. And so you could create a texture on your 3D object, and form and particular don't allow you to do that. So Mir is very powerful in that sense. Also, you could come down here to other stuff like your shader, and you can, you don't have to follow along here, but in the shader section, we didn't talk about this before, but there's kind of like 2 shaders. Like you could have like a basic shader, and if you want, you could have a second pass, which allows you to create a wireframe on top of the object. And you could take down the line size if we want to, or whatever. But this allows you to have, put a wireframe mesh on objects easily, which can be really cool. So that's 3D objects in Trapcode, Form, and Mir. And next we want to talk about something a little bit different. So I'm going to go to the 05 folder, Sprites, and I'm going to open up the 13 comp, Sprites intro. And, we talked, again, I've mentioned this a few times, but, you have the emitter of the particles, then you also have the particles themselves. And so the 3D object we've been talking about, it affects the emitter or the base form of the particles, but there's also a lot of customization you could do to the particles themselves. So we've looked at, like circles and squares and whatnot, but really there's a lot of power that you can get into when it comes to custom particles. And in the Trapcode world, this is referred to as sprites. So I'm going to open up a sprites intro, which I already said and already did, but one more time for good measure. So here we have a Trapcode form. It's a basic thing. I'm going to go into the base form and leave it set to grid. And I'm going to take particles XYZ to 1. So we just have one 2D sheet of particles. I'm going to increase the size, make that bigger. And actually particles in Y, let's just take down to like 2. So we have just like 2 little strings like that. And particles in X, let's take down to like something really small, like 4 or 5. And actually particles in Y, I'm down, let's just take it down to 1. So we have one little string of particles. So particles at X, I have at 13, really any number I'll do, 5 to 20, anywhere in that range is fine. And then particles in Y and Z is 1. So we just have one 2D string of particles. Now I want to go into the particle section. And first thing I want to do is I want to crank up the size so we can see what we're doing here. We talked about these spheres. I briefly mentioned squares. But there are several other types of particles you can create. I believe last week I mentioned a cloudlet, maybe. And so if we increase the feather there, maybe increase the size, we can create some kind of like cloudy effects and whatnot. There's some cool little stars, shiny stars are fun. But what I'm going to do here is actually I'm going to choose sprite. And as soon as you choose one of the sprite or textured polygon options, then you instantly lose your particle because you then need to choose what your custom sprite will be. And you do that here in the texture section, or if you don't want, and the texture section allows you to choose something from your comp. But you could also click choose sprite. And just like with 3D object, a 3D object where there's a browser and it comes with a bunch of presets, same thing here. When you click on choose sprite, there's a bunch of really awesome presets for sprites in all different categories for custom particles. There's 2D shapes, which are great for like motion graphics or flat graphics, UI type stuff. There's 3D shapes, there's bokeh, there's organic stuff, which is really cool. And so I'm going to do something kind of unconventional. I'm going to open up smoke and fire, and you can see that we have these cool explosions. I'll choose smoke loop 1 in the smoke and fire area. Choose smoke loop 1, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And so now our particle is this smoke loop. Now, I'm actually going to go back up to my base form and maybe only have like 5 particles in X here, just 5. And then I might want to increase the particle size in the particle section. So we have this a little bit bigger. Now, we have this unmult option where we can turn this to on, and that removes the black from our sprites right away, which is cool. But I'm going to leave that off, and I'm going to set the blend mode instead to lighten so that these will lighten each other. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to turn that back to normal, and then I'm going to change lighten in my blend mode down here. There we go. Now, I'm going to increase the size even more. Actually, I do need these to blend on top of each other, so maybe there we go. Okay, so I'm going to take both to lighten. Maybe actually take the blend mode to screen on the layer. Yeah, so I'll take the layer blend mode to screen, the particle blend mode to lighten, and maybe I might want to increase the size of this a little bit. Yeah, I think it's probably fine. But now as I play this back, you can see that it's actually using a movie file or an image sequence as, and well, in this case it's a movie, but you could also use an image sequence, pre-comp, whatever. And we're using footage of smoke as the particle. So we have this like very organic effect here. Actually, I'm just gonna spread this out, take the particles, make them bigger. There we go. So you can see here, I'm gonna lower the position, get down to the bottom. we have this very cool effect because of sprites. This looks like a movie. We put like some VFX footage down at the bottom, but in actuality, this is a particle system. We're just playing around with the sprites, the custom particles, which is, you know, really, really awesome. And so again, not to again beat this drum yet again, but the versatility of form, y'all, it's incredible. Like the alien fire thing, the blue fire that we made earlier, and then like the UI stuff with like the circles, that kind of like, you know, disco pattern or whatever we were making, and then here now this like organic smoke that we're creating. You really can do so much with all particle systems, and then also form is really incredible. And again, form allows you to have particles that just exist and not drift off, that live forever. So you can create like little movies or whatever, like a video of a butterfly or something like that you've keyed out that you can use and create a particle system with that. They don't die, which is cool. I was going to go to another UI example here in the 05 folder with the sprites, but I think we've pretty much covered everything that I wanted to cover with that. So Nick, I'm just going to hand it back over to you as a way of my penance for like taking too much time initially.
No, man, you're showing some super cool stuff. I love it.
Thanks.
What's
Okay,
you have a lot of different sprite references in that comp, if I see that too, right?
Oh yeah, sorry, I switched things over. I did in one of these comps. Yeah, I'm not really sure, but yeah, but I usually use a lot. If I have a lot of, yes, I see what you're saying now. In the background, I pre-rendered that stuff, but yeah, I did use sprites all over the place when I first made that. But yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to pick up where Chad left off. We're kind of talking about sprites, and you were talking about image sequences or image movie files as your sprite reference. And in this exercise, which you can find if you go into the project files and go into the Nick folder, you're looking for the form multi-object begin. And multi-object actually stands for, or it means multi-sprite. So we're going to have multiple sprites as our particle source. And I want to show how you can set that up inside of an After Effects composition. So once you've opened that form multi-object begin composition, we're going to do a few steps to set this up. So we're going to build a 3D object, which is going to use the wireframe mode of Mir as the base. And then we're going to have some particles laid out over top using form and multiple sprites. And the reference or the 3D model for both of these effects is going to be an amplifier, which is an OBJ object. So inside of the composition, select the Mir layer, and under Effect Controls, you twirl down the properties. We're going to change the base geometry here to 3D model. Just like Chad showed earlier, we have our 3D model settings, and the reference that we want happens to be the amplifier.obj file. Once we add that, we'll start to see the amplifier. To get a better look at it, let's actually apply a camera to our scene. So we'll do this in 2 steps. So we're going to go to the layer menu and go new camera. You want to add a 1-node camera, no depth of field, and we can set the default settings to be 50 millimeter. Press OK. The second step is with the camera selected. We just want to set up a camera connected to a null so that we can rotate around it. And with the camera selected, if we go to the layer menu, we can go to camera, create orbit null. And now the camera is attached to the null. The null is 3D. If you pressed R for rotation on the null, we can easily rotate around this 3D amplifier that is in Mir. Now in Mir, let's continue to decorate this. And Chad actually already showed that one of the surface presets in the material section happens to be wireframe. So we're going to choose wireframe to get a slightly different look of the amplifier. And then we're going to add to this look by scrolling down even more. And in the shader section, you can see that the shader is currently set to flat. I want you to set that to density. Now we get a little bit of a thinner look there of our wireframe with density and a wireframe. And you can use that orbit null to rotate around this object. Just because of the preview, that's why it's giving you a low resolution version as I move around it. Okay, so that's the base. Now there's a form layer inside this composition. It's turned off, so you want to turn it on. And we're now that it's turned on, you can see that it has those three basically grids of spherical particles. And instead of this as the base form, first of all, let's twirl that down, and under show forms, under base form, let's set this to a 3D model and look at those same settings under the 3D model settings where we'll also reference the amplifier. So the cool part about this, and I'm just going to turn off Mir temporarily to show this, we have two systems kind of referencing the same OBJ. And the cool part is the size of Mir and the size of form, when you switch it to 3D model, it's the same size. So they're kind of connected in this 3D world. And we can have one with one set of particles, using the different textures that can decorate Mir. And then this top one here, do some other cool things too. So to make this look differently, I want to turn off Mir again. And I actually have prepared in this composition a pre-comp called Music Symbols 2. And if we turn that on and move our playhead to the beginning of the comp, in fact, I'm going to solo this. There's a bunch of these shapes that they're just really small, which is why they look not so great in terms of quality. Let me actually up that to full. And let's hop inside the composition, the music symbols comp, by double clicking it. So here are a series of 14 shape layers. They're all of various music symbols. And in order to prep this so that form sees these multiple sprites and allow us to have a little bit of randomness to where these sprites are going to appear, we need to first of all make these all one frame long. We need to have them staggered sequentially, and we need to have this composition be a lot smaller. So the size of these shape layers are about 64 by 64. So let's take that first step to make this composition really small. I'm going to give a little bit of wiggle room by going to my composition settings. I'll unlink the lock aspect ratio. Let's set this to 80 by 80. You can now see that with that little bit of buffer, we can still see each of those individual shapes. We should. Are they black? Why have they grayed out on my system? There they are. Let me try that again. Maybe I made it too small? No, I see them. They just grayed out for some reason on my system. Interesting. I'm going to try to go with this and just see what happens. That's an interesting feature that I didn't expect to happen. Okay, so first of all, with all of these shapes, and with my playhead at the beginning of this composition, to easily trim these all to one frame, you can just press Option or Alt on a PC followed by the right square bracket. And now all of these layers are one frame. The next step is with all of these layers is if you right-click any of them with them still selected and head to your keyframe assistant, you can sequence these layers. You don't want any overlap, just accept those default settings. And then if you press OK, and we zoomed in on that comp, we should see each of these individual shapes. I can kind of see previews of them now as I scroll through, although for some reason it looks like my cache is messed up. Anyhow, I'm going to move to that last layer. And here with my playhead, I'm going to press N to trim the comp, and then right-click, trim comp to work area. So the composition is the exact same length of the 14 frames of each of the individual shape layers. Now that is your setup or step-by-step process to essentially set up a multi-sprite sequence reference, which form and both particular can do. So if we head back into the form multi-object begin composition, and I go to my effect controls, select form, let me turn that on. With form selected and soloed, I'll close the base form settings, go to the particle settings, and change the particle type from sphere. Let's go to sprite colorize. This will allow us to use form system to colorize each of our sprites. Now that that's chosen, let's go to the texture section, and we're going to reference that music symbols 2 pre-comp. And we should see within a few seconds a actual form system referencing each of those sprites. My fingers are crossed right now. Now, as
brilliant idea,
After
man.
Effects,
Awesome.
oh, thanks, man. And as After Effects calculates this, did want to mention that an important step to have a bit of randomization here with your form composition is to make sure the time sampling is set to random still frame. So this will just make sure that there is just a still frame held for each of those music symbols. In fact, let me just solo form by itself. And referencing just the source should do the job of it being able to see this system. And
hey, Nick, while we're waiting, I got a question.
yeah.
Do you know very much about like rendering through Cineware? Like if you like especially as far as like a third-party render engines go, like if you're going to render something from like Octane or Redshift through Cineware in After Effects, if that comes through, because I thought that there were some limitations, if I remember correctly, about, ooh, that's cool. I thought there were some limitations about like global illumination or something like that. So it seems like there are some settings that come through, but not others. I don't know, but they might have changed that since last time I looked into it.
That's a great question, Chad. So I'm not, in fact, I actually texted someone when I saw that in the thread just to see if I could get a response on that, and I haven't yet. So I'm not sure about the third-party renderers like Octane or Redshift. I don't think so. I'm not 100% positive, but I think that the best workflow in terms of those external renderers is an AEC workflow versus having a Cinema 4D Cineware file in those types of cases.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Brilliant. Thanks, man. Sorry, as you were. Looks cool.
Yeah. No, and for some reason, this sprite is just taking forever to render. And I have a finished composition for this main reason. It's form multi-object end. I'm glad that I added 2 names and spelled object there wrong. But I turned off the proxy because it wasn't included with the files, the Chad and Nick files, but you can actually see the Mir object and actually 2 form layers. I just did them on 2 different ones. For the fact is that I wanted one system to have an audio reaction and the other system not. But here is those same sprites being referenced. They're just really small. And if I took my camera, let me just zoom in a bit on the scene. Other way. We should be able to see in a second each of those sprites, whoa, actually being referenced. There we go. So here are each of those actual music symbols that are mapped and colorized using a gradient on the form-based system. And in fact, in another week, we'll see how it reacts to music. So that's kind of what I wanted to show with the actual form-based system. And so we have some time left. So I think I can get into a little bit of a light-based workflow or using lights inside as a reference inside of particular. And I have a composition here called Light Helix Extract Begin, which you can double click to see. And what's happened is there is a project here. It's a Cinema 4D file, which is referencing, in fact, in this file, there's nothing special. All there is a light. And in fact, similar to what I did with the Mixamo file, I basically attached a light to a helix spline and added basically a animation tag where the light animates along the spline, and then I baked the animation. Inside of After Effects, it's already set up here that this light, which is called light copy, is moving along the path of what was a helix shape, right from here to here over the span of 7 seconds. And I find it particularly a lot easier to sort of make certain light paths in Cinema 4D using splines than all the time within After Effects. But this is one example of how we can connect or use our light as a reference to emit particles from. So now that that's set up, or that is explained, I'm going to go to the layer menu. We'll add a solid. After adding a solid, we'll also then go to the effect menu and add a fresh version of particular in this instance. Okay, once that's added, the trick with lights in particular is that, no pun intended, particular is looking for a light called emitter. And if there is no light called emitter, it would ignore it if you go into the emitter section and shows light. However, you can, of course, go to the light naming section and choose a name for particular to look for. And I'm just going to ask it to look for anything named light, because that's the name of my light here. You can already see that now we have some sort of particle animation. In fact, if I play this back, it looks a little bit erratic. And some of the reasons it's erratic is because it has a velocity. And the other reason is that there is, by default, in particular, a size that is automatically applied to most emitters that you select. So in order to see this light path better to begin with, what we can do is first of all go to the emitter size value and set that to 0. And the next is to go down to our velocity section and 0 those out. And all of a sudden, this light that was from Cinema 4D, right, has particles, of course, being emitted from it or following that light path. And once we get to this point, we could then start to bring up things such as the velocity, and in fact, even better, where we could go into our velocity over life graph, and then with a velocity value that you select, choose to have from a preset, those particles start off with no velocity and then ramp them up to a larger velocity, right? So they generally emit out from the shape. The next thing that we could do, of course, is bring down the amount of the velocity that's applied, as well as play around with the direction of where these particles are going to go, if they're going to go in a specific direction or all over the place when they're emitted. Not to mention the fade in and fade out, as well as the size of our particles. So now that we've gone through this basic example, I wanted to go through something a bit more advanced using a secondary system and a light. So let's do that to finish things off, at least start off this project with you guys. And the composition is called Emit from Light from Parent Light Start. You can double click to select it. And already in this composition, there is a solid layer with the default emitter going. Now to create kind of a light animation, in this case, we're going to go use an After Effects light. So I'll go to Layer, New Light. This time I'll just call this emitter. And we want to have this light move around a circle. One way to do that is just to actually, with nothing selected in your composition, select the ellipse tool from your shape menu. I'm just going to hold down Shift Option or Shift Alt, click and drag a circle shape. And with nothing selected, the circle is created. I'll just move it over here to the side. And now all I want to do is go into this shape layer, into the ellipse one's path options, and then just grab this path. In fact, I'm going to make sure my playhead's at the very beginning, and then I'm going to press Command C. I'm going to take this path, go to my particular system or the particles here. In fact, if you just want to bring up particular, you can press E to do so to bring up the effect on the solid. And then let's head to the emitter where I'm going to grab the position value of the emitter. Sorry, I messed this up here. We actually want to do this with the light. So select the emitter light, press P for position on the light. And with your composition at the beginning, you're going to right click, you're going to just press Command V to paste. And if I turn off this shape, all of a sudden, we have a light basically moving around a shape. Let's change the direction of that, where if you select the position value in all the keyframes, we can just right click, use the keyframe assistant to time reverse this. So now the light is traveling in the opposite direction. And if you want to play with timing of how long you want this animation to be, in this case, because we copied from a shape layer, if you grab the last keyframe, look how all of the spacing between those keyframes that were added, Chad, are moving uniformly.
Love it.
So I've just made this, yeah, let's go with like 4 seconds. Okay. Now, in particular, or on that solid, I'm going to go to my effect controls. We can go into the emitter section and we can reference that light. And all of a sudden, there's our particles following that circular light path. Let's bring down the size so to 0 and bring down our velocity values. And the cool part is once this is set up, we can head into the designer and start to use its power to add to this system. So this is, you can set it up inside of After Effects and go into the designer for the final touches. So I'm going to just do a couple things here to the primary system because we're going to add a secondary one. So I'll head to the fast physics section, which is a quick way of adding some type of physics and velocity to our particle system. And here I'm going to go to the fast physics effects position block. And once I clicked on this, it automatically brought this up. And then once I click on effect position, we should start to see kind of like a fractal field starting to affect the position movement of our main particles. In fact, I'll increase that. The turbulence field effect position is set to 80. I'm going to make that 160. Now, the one thing to note about this fast physics system and this turbulence is that it starts to take an effect on these particles 0.5 seconds into the animation. So the particles follow their normal path or normal emission, and then at 0.5 seconds in is when the turbulent field takes effect. We can increase this number actually to something else, which works really well for things like smoke simulations. In fact, I think there's a video on Cineware on that today that would probably utilize this or a similar time in the environment section. The other thing I'm going to do is just play around with the turbulent evolution offset, which is sort of playing with the position change. You can see what's happening to the actual path of these particles, or as I drag this, is just basically changing the effect it has on these particles, or the turbulent field, so to speak. I'll leave the turbulence scale, I'll set it to 5, and then just increase the complexity a little bit to a value of 7. Okay, we're actually done with this system. And I don't actually even want it to be on. I just sort of want this to be referenced. So one way to have this referenced by another system, but not have it seen, is to just go to the size of these particles. So the size block and set that to 0. Now in your systems, press the plus icon to bring up a second system. We want this second system under the emitter type to emit under the emitter type from the parent system. So this is going to look at every single particle being born. So by default, that's 100. And it's going to create 100 particles that will be emitted from that. Now, once I press this, we get this kind of cool simulation starting off. However, this particle system, this system 2, has its own motion block, right? And that has its own velocity when we first add this new system, and we don't want that at all. In fact, we want this system to absorb the properties of the motion block from the primary system. And one way to easily do that is to click on the trash icon, and now all of a sudden it's absorbed the motion block from the primary system. We can start to see those particles being born. See this even better, I'll actually go to the size of these particles, the size block, and I'll decrease this to a value of 1, so they're a lot smaller, and in fact add a bit of randomness. Let's make this a value of 35. And in fact, to have even more of these particles or more of this system that's emitting from parent, I'm going to go back to the primary system, back to the emitter type. This is the primary emission that's turned off right now. I'm just going to crank up the particles per second to 500, which is then going to have a direct effect on the secondary system here. And while this is slowing down playback, we get this kind of cool, smooth emission. And in fact, in some cases, almost like this additional look by having more particles be emitted. There's almost way too many right now, but hopefully this gives you an idea for how we can kind of set up a pretty cool simulation with a secondary system that's emitting from the parent system. Bring that down back to 100. And I'll show you a few final things I did because we're getting close to the end of our 2-hour session here. So in the project panel, pretty much using those principles, here is the completed project. The difference being just a few things, but this is the same thing, a circle. And you can see there, there's just a greater turbulent field on that emit from parent system. So let's focus on that. What's causing a little bit of this distortion is an effect from universe that's on an adjustment layer called chromatic aberration. So you can turn that on and off to see its effect. I have a proxy on, so that's not going to work, but that's what's causing the red-green separation at the side here. The actual look of these particles, what's kind of giving it, in my opinion, such a beautiful look, is an extreme shallow depth of field from the After Effects camera added in the composition. So if you press AA to reveal the camera settings, you'll see an extreme blur level, 350%, and a focus distance that is in the same area of where these particles are being born. And that's what's creating this like crazy blur spots here, that extreme blur level. We could increase that even further by choosing a different iris shape, which will give you even more believability there with that emission. And that is something that you can do with lights.
Sweet, man.
How did everyone find today?
It's cool. So much information. I feel like I'm still trying to like iron out like the whole hands-on thing, you know? I feel like it's just kind of like a different thing. And so like half the time I'm teaching like it's like a regular webinar, and then the other half the time I'm like, oh yeah, it's a different thing. We go slow and we do stuff all together and whatnot. So yeah, I feel like I'm still trying to like iron out the format, but I think it's like really cool. It's really cool to like just kind of like have extra time and to like really get into stuff. And yeah, it's like a lot more information, which is really cool.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's fair to still be digesting, Cheryl. That was a comment, just digesting all the information. There's just so much that you can do with particular, and I think, you know, being faced with trying to show you all of the things that are possible, we're trying to balance some beginner-based instruction along with just showing you the possibilities of really accessing particles. And I think that the main thing here is that although while some of those steps might have been we might have moved quickly. We have recorded this session, and I highly encourage everyone, although it might seem repetitive, to go over this again and take that content and go through those hands-on exercise file. This is speaking as an instructor and someone who's also gone through hands-on exercise files through a number of years. It usually takes you like double or triple the amount of time to step through those exercises based on when you have the instruction. And while we're trying our best to pace ourselves, it's also just hard to not have to see your screen. So it's hard to see our kind of pacing, but we do appreciate the comments. But I just wanted to make mention that we are encouraging you guys to go check out that recording again and download those project files. And you have that for reference forever, for what I know, on the YouTube page to go through these particle exercises.
Yeah, I was trying to find a balance between like getting people like up to speed, like this is kind of like the very basics of what a tool does, and then here's potentially what you could do with it down the road. So it probably can feel overwhelming in one sitting to get even that, but yeah.
Awesome. And Timothy was just saying, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we definitely packed into 2 hours, and thanks so much for your comments. And we're going to take some of that feedback and make sure that we apply it next week for some hands-on. What are we doing, Chad?
I think we're doing physics. Is that next week, or am I skipping ahead?
We are. No, we're doing some physics. So some of the things you've seen, we're going to expand on physics and all of the other options inside of particular for you, and some of the stuff within form as well. And before we go, let me just bring up the YouTube page here. So this is the private link that you guys will all have access to on YouTube. Just give us a few hours to upload the video. I would suggest just check back tomorrow morning for safekeeping, as GoToWebinar renders this to the cloud. But here's where you'll go. It's an unlisted channel. And again, I'm just going to copy this so that you guys have access to this unlisted channel for the hands-on training for you to go back to. Okay. Sean, there's no end date for these videos being up. It's just unlisted. So I don't think they have any plans to remove it just yet, or at least I haven't been informed. Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for your comment, Cheryl and Drake. Really appreciate it. And yeah, totally suggest you guys rewatch, and I hope to see some amazing particle systems from all of you in the next little while. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope to see everybody next week too. Be awesome.
Awesome. Take care, everybody.
See everybody. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.